Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again on this continuing weekly Bible study that we're doing in the Hebrew language. And we are in 1 Samuel chapter 17 and continuing with verse 41. And you'll be able to see it on our screen. Let's see, reading the Hebrew, it's Vayelech Hapelisti, that's Philistine in Hebrew, Holech Vekarev el David. And so the Philistine began drawing near to David. What you're going to notice here is how expressive the Hebrew language is in that it's painting word pictures, and it's creating this scene here because there's just words that you wouldn't have to be going through and describing, but it's working in such a way as to help you visualize what is happening. And so verse 41 just says, that the Philistines drawing near, noticing here, Bahaish, there was a man, Nosei, who bore the shield, Ha-Sinach, and it was Lefanav. It was before him. And this word lefanav is kind of interesting. It means panav is the face. So remember that all of Hebrew words are based upon an action. There are very few, in fact, I don't know that there are any that are based upon thoughts. Everything is first based upon an action. And so before the face of him is embedded in this word, just translated as before him. And so this armor bearer is going in front of Goliath. Kind of interesting too that I'm sure this guy was somewhat of a warrior in his own right and could probably hold his own on the battlefield, and probably in a natural sense could have taken care of David all on his own. But again, you're going to see this was not a natural episode here. So we get to verse 2 here. Vayabet ha-Philistine, and it's Vayere, and this is Vayere. This is interesting that the Philistine didn't see David coming from afar. So commentators feel that he could potentially have had bad eyesight, which is why he was only basically useful in close combat, where he was, of course, a very formidable opponent. But medically, there is some link to those with very large body shapes that are beyond the norm when genetics causes them to grow to extreme heights, that some of their other senses are dulled. And so verse 42 gives the indication that he did not see David and understand who was coming until he got very, very close to him. But then look at this, once he got close, he saw David. It says that he disdained him, and he was only a youth, and uses all kinds of what we would call derogatory terms in a military sense or in this battle sense, that he was ruddy. We've studied that word before, and he had a fair countenance and was good looking, just didn't fit the hardened battle warrior that he was expecting. And so this really draws a response from Goliath. He says, Vayomer hapelisti el David. So he says to David, Hachelev, am I a dog? The word chelev, which is where the word Caleb comes from, means something that's near to your heart. You'll see the last two letters of the lamed and the beit, which is lev, which is the word for heart. And the preposition in there of the kaf is like your heart. And so the name for a dog in Hebrew is like your heart, which dog lovers will rejoice over that. Kind of tidbit of information here. And so here he says, am I a dog? Anochi ki ata ba'ile bamiklot. You come out to me with sticks. Now this word stick is really a staff. So here we get another indication that David didn't just have a slingshot. He had his full shepherd's armament, which was basically his staff that he used to defend himself. Again, taking something that he's very familiar with and using it in the midst of what he knows is going to be a battle. And so Goliath, really roars at this. And then we get into some really interesting words. By Kalel, he cursed, which means to um, make light of. Again, the word cursing in the scriptures is a fascinating study on its own as to, we automatically think it has to do with witches and spells and things like that. But really what he's doing is just smearing the name. He's belittling it and saying that it's of no value. And so the Philistine says this to David, and he cursed him, and he uses by his gods. So this is Baal Be Elohav, which is by the gods. Notice that the word for God is the same, whether you're talking about a true God or a not real God, a false God like the Philistine is doing, or whether it's Elohim, Elohav, speaking about the one true God. Pretty much the same as in English. So then there's this discussion going on. We get to verse 44, and Vayomer Hapilisti El David Lecha Ele Ve'atana, that I'm going to give your basarka, your flesh to the birds, leof. And then it uses a neat word that in Hebrew is really the word for heaven. It's Hashemayim. Those of you that have studied Hebrew will recognize that word, but here it's translated as air. So that's kind of interesting. Again, the Hebrew thought of what was heaven was very different than what we think about in our Western minds, and minds that have been somewhat conditioned through religious systems through the ages as to what heaven is. But to the Jewish people, they had no concept at this time frame of anything like that. So everything above the air, basically from the book of Genesis chapter 1, when God created the heavens and the earth, it was anything above the earth was Hashemayim, was the heavens. And of course, the translators wanted to distinguish from that a little bit and bring it to an earthly realm, and then translate it as air. So Ule Vehemat, the beasts of Hasadeh, the field. And then, of course, there's this exchange going on, and David responds back, Vayomer David El Hapistili Lishti. Now, what's interesting here, too, is that they're talking to each other. I wonder if we ever thought about what language they're using. We would think that Hebrew was spoken by the Israelites, but again, this was very early. We don't know what type of Hebrew. It wasn't the type that Ezra formed and kind of reformulated many thousands of years later. So was this a Paleo Hebrew, which we have record of finding characters very similar? And so that could be, but most likely they were bilingual, and that whatever language they spoke in Philistia was also spoken by the Israelites. There's another thought that it might have been Aramaic. Aramaic was known to be an ancient language that predated, in at least some form, Hebrew as we know it today, and fit into this Paleo-Hebrew type of Semitic language. And so, but yet they were able to converse. So either they were bilingual, which for us in the United States is something very unusual, but from most countries, it's not uncommon. In fact, it's the norm to know at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 languages. So they were able to converse. So that's an interesting note here. And so he spoke to him and said, here's where verse 45 has been the topic of many wonderful sermons, that you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of Yahweh, the Lord of hosts, or Yahweh of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel. And in here is just a very interesting conglomeration or arrangement, I should say, of names here that are assigned to where David is calling upon for his strength and who he is serving with all his heart. And so he says, in the name of Yahweh, which is the authority or the reputation of, it wasn't a formula that he was speaking in that created any power. We have to remember that when it's used in this frame, it's understanding who he's speaking about. And he uses the word Yahweh, which is the compassionate, merciful side of God, which is somewhat, again, interesting why he quoted that, obviously wanting it for himself, but of course not wanting it for the Philistine nation. He wanted to conquer them. And then it uses the word Sabaoth, which is Lord of the Sabbath or Lord of Hosts, but it's really the armies, and it's Elohe Ma'arakot, which is another very interesting word here of the armies of angels and the armies of, because normally Lord of Hosts is used in discussion or reference to the angels in heaven, the hosts of heaven. And so he's calling upon some very interesting phraseology here. And if we just highlight over the word that's translated as armies, is really the battle line. He's saying that the nation that's fighting, that all the people that are in the trenches, that God is going to use them and fight for them. And it even uses the word Israel, which of course is proper to identify them as the nation. But remember that Israel's base name understanding is champion of God. It was given to Jacob when he wrestled with the supernatural being and prevailed against him, and this name was given to him. So I think there's a dual meaning here, that Yisrael could be that Goliath is coming against the armies of the champion of God, a champion of El. And remember, that same El used in Israel is also the same word of El that's used for the God that Goliath seemed to ascribe to. So David could really be a little more pointed in here and saying, you know, Goliath, you think your God is so big. Well, my God is a champion of your God. He's going to triumph over your God. And then he says, Asher harafta, of whom you have defied. And of course, this is an appeal form. So again, very interesting, very intensive. We'll just take a look at this word haraf, which is to reproach, and a lot of meaning packed into this word. It's very fascinating to do a study over this, because it just has roots in some very strong emotions. They took this very seriously. These were very serious words that caused a heated action here, and related to that word of causing anger and heat. And so, you know, very strong language, and David is responding. And of course, this will lead us up to this battle. And we're going to have to come back next week and find some more things as David goes on and tells the Goliath how he's going to dispatch him. So again, thankful that you've taken the time to join in with this meeting and study, and I pray that you find it beneficial, and that God will bless you as you take an interest in the Hebrew language and just see what a beautiful record we have of what God's mercy and grace can bring us through the study of this language. So God bless you and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.